What's up, guys? Welcome back to Roots and Refuge Farm. Today we're shooting a whole video doing a task that I don't think I've ever shot a whole video doing. That is weeding the garden. One of the things I struggle with in creating content is staying on top of the tasks in my life that are, they're hard to stay on top of anyway, like weeding the garden. I don't know a lot of people who are like, yeah, I gotta get my weeding time in today because it's some form of self-care. You can certainly put a positive spin on it because it's something that you gotta do, but it's just one of those necessary tasks in growing a garden. And for me, when I'm balancing all the things that I have to do, I'm trying to multitask. So I'm like, okay, I need to do these things for the kids, and I need to cook dinner, and I need to do these other tasks for the garden or the farm or whatever, and I need to shoot a video. So when I get to marry my to-do list and kill two birds with one stone, the videos get made about the other stuff. And weeding really usually doesn't make that cut. So sometimes it just doesn't get done. The thing with weeding is that the more routinely you do it and stay on top of it, the easier it is to maintain overall. So today, I'm doing an entire video weeding my garden. And I figured that it would be as good a time as any for us to have a little chat. So if you're wondering, this is the Cobra Head tool. I talked about this in a recent video where I was talking about garden tools, and it's really good about getting up underneath root systems for things so you're not just pulling the tops of weeds off. And I want to talk about something that has particularly been on my mind today because of a place where I am in my life, but something that I just want to share with you. Now, I do repeat myself often because I actually feel like it's important for us to hear things multiple times in order for us to learn effectively. And I really want to teach you guys. I really want you to walk away from what we're producing, and I want your life to be richer. It's really important to me. It's like a desire of my heart for that to be what happens here on my channel. One of the things that I say all the time is turn your waiting room into a classroom. I think I've probably said it enough that it's become a little bit cliche. Even around here, you might even hear that and be like, oh yeah, I know, I've heard you say that before. But today I want to talk to you a little bit about the history of that phrase. We bought our house in April of 2014. We actually moved in. Next week is 7 years since we moved in here. I grew up in town. I do not have any history whatsoever of rural living, of growing food. My mom gardened, but she didn't do a lot of food gardening or anything like that. That was all pretty foreign to me. Now, I'd been really wooed by the idea of having a farm as a really young girl because I loved animals. My uncle had a kind of small farm, and they raised pigs and stuff like that, and I remember visiting him and just being so enamored by the idea of that. So I'd always said I wanted a farm, but I'd never had anything even closely that resembled one. So we moved into our house in 2014 on April 27th, the day after our 3-year wedding anniversary. So yes, Monday is Jeremiah and I's 10-year wedding anniversary, and we're very excited to celebrate that. And when we met 11 years ago, I had this dream of a farm, and I met him and I told him, oh, this is what I want more than anything. And it was so impossible. When I met Jeremiah, I was a single mom. I was substitute teaching to make enough money, just to barely pay bills. And he and I started our love story the way so many do, talking late at night on the phone and just dreaming about what our ideal life would be. I remember asking him once on one of those really late night phone conversations, what would your perfect Saturday be? And our perfect Saturdays looked a lot alike, which was wake up in our house in the country. Of course, I was imagining a farm, and he was just imagining having space for toys. And we talked about how we would raise our kids that way, how I talked about having a garden, he talked about having time and making these great memories with our children. And I would say that a big part of our relationship was really founded on this similar desire for, a more back to basics life, a life that was very, very family centric. And though it was more my dream to grow the food and have the farm, he was definitely on board because it went completely in line with what his dream was. And he admittedly, he liked me a lot. I think I probably could have got him to agree to more than just chickens in a garden. But it was just our desire to live this simple life. We got married, we were in ministry, we were in youth ministry. I was a student, I had a photography business, we lived in town, and we had a sweet life, we really did. But the aching to have a farm just grew and grew and grew in my heart. And by the time we found our property, I would say it had reached the point of heart sickness. Like, it felt so impossible. I looked at properties all the time. They were all outside of our budget, and it just felt like it was never gonna happen for us. We'd been denied for a loan, for a house we wanted to buy, and just different things. We'd set ourselves to paying off our debt, doing Dave Ramsey, and trying to get in the position that maybe it would just even be possible. And I remember this moment, I've shared this multiple times before, where I had just become completely heartsick because I had just accepted the fact, I gotta weed, see I start talking, I stop weeding. Because I had just accepted the fact that it wasn't gonna happen for me anytime in the foreseeable future. But even still, even though I look at that season and I think, oh, silly girl, you had so many opportunities to learn, I didn't completely forsake the classroom entirely. It's when I learned to pick wild blackberries to forage. I learned different remedies, herbal remedies, and how to use basic plant medicine, how to eliminate waste, a lot of like natural living tips. It's when I learned to cook from scratch, how to keep cast iron, and I learned how to can during that time. Out of those foraged blackberries, I would make jam and can it. Learned how to bake bread. And essentially in the season where I was being denied for loans and it felt absolutely impossible to have this most earnest dream in my heart, I turned my waiting room into a classroom. Really because I couldn't do anything else. Then, a little over 7 years ago, we found this foreclosure. Now I have a video kind of telling the long story of how that unfolded that I'll put down below a link to. But when we moved in here, this crazy catastrophic like life event happened, and there was this tornado that came very near to here, and a dear friend of mine lost her children in that tornado. It hit about 3 miles from our house, and we were really closely involved with that whole situation. And that, coupled with the fact that this was a foreclosure, which needed a lot of work inside the house to make it livable, it was this season of like being handed your dream in a very rough form, very much needed to be loved back to life, but not being able to love it back to life yet. It was like saying, hey, here's everything you wanted. Now just sit there and hold it for a little while. I remember writing an article for a magazine that I used to write for during that time, and I was talking about turning your waiting room into a classroom. And that was probably one of the most excruciating seasons of the classroom, because it felt like I was there. I had it in my hands, I could see it, but it still wasn't time yet. And timing is everything. You can totally do the right thing in the wrong time and completely screw it up. But as that season unfolded, I continued to learn. I continued to pick blackberries down the roadside here and just absorbed every bit of information that I could. I read books, I watched vlogs, I read blogs, I read magazines, anything I could get my hands on. I was absorbing everything because all I wanted to do was start homesteading. And truly, once we started, that made all the difference. Having that knowledge and the eagerness and the yearning and all the time spent wishing for it, that carried me through so many of the hard times. Because when you're wanting for a life like this, it's hard work. It really is. I mean, there are times where the only thing, Bear, hey, quit sniffing at the geese. You're making them mad. Come here. Come on. Come on. Come over here to me. Come over here to me. It's a hard life. It's going to require an ironclad choice to keep going. Because I hate to tell you this, but you're gonna have stuff die. You're gonna have stuff fail. You're gonna make mistakes that cost you something. That's just the way this goes. You are not going to become a homesteader failure-free. You're just not. You're not gonna become a gardener failure-free. You're gonna kill plants. You are going to get disappointed. And the beauty of the classroom is that even when that happens, and it will, and I don't mean if, it will. Even when it happens, though, you're gonna keep going. Because you put the time in. You made the investment, you learned the stuff. You wanted it. Just being willing to keep wanting something takes a great deal of bravery. Just being willing to stick with a desire in the face of not getting it immediately, that's hard. And like being brave enough to do that and committing to learn in the process, that is like investing in a bank account that when you have those I want to give up moments, you get to withdraw from. So right now, 7 years almost to the day of moving onto my farm, we are preparing to leave it. We're preparing to move. We'll actually be announcing all of that next week. You're gonna get to learn about what's next for us. I'm working on that right now. Now that everything is final and sure, we can give that information out to you. And I'm very excited to share it. And I felt really reflective this last few days, like moving into the 7-year anniversary, moving into what's next. I've been feeling really reflective about what the last 7 years has really meant. Now, I don't know what your dreams are. They might be homesteading or gardening. It might be something completely different. Maybe you're called into the medical field. Maybe you're making a difference in your community. Maybe your dream is just to raise a healthy family because you weren't raised in one. I hope you'll hear me in a sense that this really applies to anybody, because most dreams have a classroom phase. Most dreams are going to take a season of sticking with it and investing and growing yourself. I can't think of any actually that don't require that. In the last 7 years for me, I thought what was happening when this started was I thought it was just fulfillment. I thought it was just that I had desired for this for so long and I was finally getting it. And for a little while it seemed that way. It seemed like, wow, I used to come down to this chicken coop that used to be here where the garden is now, and I would literally just cry like a baby. I would just come down here as where I did my prayer, my quiet time, and I would put music on and just like worship in my chicken yard and cry and pray. Because I couldn't believe it, because it had been so long. It had literally been like, I mean, since I was like little. It had been like the majority of my life that I had desired that, and there it was right in front of me. Of course I cried. But then somewhere along the way things kind of shifted, and there was this opportunity to like be bold again. And I don't want to say it was an opportunity to become discontent. It was more like an invitation to walk the tightrope between contentment and expectation for more, and my prayers changed again. And they got bigger than what I was holding in my hands. You guys had a lot to do with that, because what I learned through doing YouTube is that I love the garden so much. I love shining this light that we have and sharing this life that is so full of peace and joy. I love that so much. But beyond just showing it, I love to teach about it. And I didn't really know that about myself before this. And so somewhere along the way, I realized that the fulfillment of my dream had led me into another classroom where I was both teaching the people who were waiting for the fulfillment of theirs, and I was learning again. I was in a waiting room again. So before we had YouTube, I used to have this like vision in my heart of a place where people could come and they could learn homesteading. And I would think about that, and I would think about how cool that would be, and I would imagine community gardens and a farm to table restaurant, and you know, like a farm fresh market where people could come and buy food. And as an extension of that, I would imagine what good could be done from a platform like that. You know, like helping low-income families and giving grants for people to be able to have homesteads of their own that might not be able to get a house, because I felt that, you know, because for so long I was that. It just started to grow. And as the realization of this love of teaching started to grow, I realized what my waiting room was. And I realized that I was actually being positioned through this camera to be in a classroom, to learn how to teach, to learn to listen to people about what they want to learn and what's helpful for them. And I was at one of those crossroads where you're given that extremely growing opportunity to realize you have to practice what you preach. So I want you to know that all this time that I've been telling you to turn your waiting room into a classroom, I've been taking my own advice. Because whenever you are dreaming of something that is beyond your ability to produce, you are in one of the most pressing faith places that life can offer you. And believe it or not, it's an incredible gift. So when Benjamin was a little boy, I mean, he's still a little boy, he's 6, but when he was a smaller boy, when he was about 2 years old, he'd be out here in the garden with me, and I wanted him to love the garden so much. So I knew I would have to make space for him, which meant making space for his mistakes. It meant making jobs whenever there wasn't really a job for him to do. And yes, it was obnoxious. For those of you gardening with toddlers, just because I tell you it's worth it doesn't mean I mean that it's easy, or that I think somehow that that is an effortless thing. And Benjamin, at 2 years old, he had a fascination with the pruners. He thought it was so fascinating that I would stand out here and prune tomatoes. And of course, that seemed to his 2-year-old self like an extremely important job. So naturally, that's the job he wanted to do. Well, at 2 years old, I didn't quite trust him with the pruners around my tomatoes. I wanted to make space, but I didn't really want it that bad. So I gave Benjamin another very important job. When Benjamin was 2, he had his own set of pruners, which I taught him to use very, very carefully for the job of pruning the grass that grows up around the sides of the garden beds. Now, it is true that once a week during that season, we would come and we would weed eat the walkways of the garden. And I would just make sure to prune the tomatoes the day before we were scheduled to do that, so that there would be grass to prune. And Benjamin spent 2 summers, ages 2 and 3, and I want to say it was the year he was 4 that he caught on to me. And he realized that pruning the grass was a job that I had made up just to keep him busy. And at the time he said, "Mom, why'd you make me prune the grass? You're just gonna weed eat the grass." And the truth was, at the beginning, I had Benjamin prune the grass because I needed him to leave my tomatoes alone. But last year when Benjamin was 5, I gave him a set of pruners and I let him prune the tomatoes. And he had developed so much hand-eye coordination pruning the grass and being there with me while I pruned the tomatoes and explained to him what I was doing, that he could actually do it. At 5 years old, he could prune the tomatoes. And I realized that part of being in the classroom, sometimes it feels like you're pruning the grass. And I felt that so much in this last season. I'm so excited and nervous and ready because I can feel the massive change that's happening in our life. And I've been praying and I'm like, God, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And I realized so many of the things that I've been doing to prepare in my classroom, it was grass pruning. And at first I thought, oh my gosh, I'm just making myself busy during this time. I should just wait for the right timing. But then I realized, like, it's preparing me. Just the preparation itself is preparing me for the moment that the pruners get put in my hands. Now I know that this is a broad pep talk, and to some of you it may be utter rubbish, but I think for those of you with ears to hear, it might be exactly what you needed to hear. That whenever you are waiting, the things that you do to learn, and even the things that you do to make the waiting tolerable, so often those are the things that you have to do. Because if you didn't do them when the fulfillment came, you wouldn't be ready to receive it. I actually really didn't mean to go off on this long thing. I had no intentions of talking about all of this. I was just gonna talk while I weed, and I've been thinking so much about turn your waiting room into a classroom, and I've just been wanting to encourage you guys wherever you are, that that's always gonna be the right thing to do. And even when it feels like you might be wasting your time, you never know what you're being prepared for. And I didn't really mean for this to turn into like devotional style content, but I don't know how to talk about this without it going in that direction. Because to me, turning your waiting room into a classroom requires such a grand measure of faith and hope that the desires of your heart are going to matter. So right now, my classroom looks like drawing out plans for a building that I can't afford to build on a piece of property that I can't yet afford to buy. And teaching people information that I don't even fully know yet. And I know that somewhere along the way between now and that being reality, that this waiting room is going to be all the classroom that I need for those things. And I'm doing the things that I know to do, like developing courses, like the Growing Gardener's course, writing books, like the First Time Gardener Growing Vegetables, like making these videos and encouraging you exactly where we are. And though some of what I do, I'm sure it's grass pruning, I know all of what I'm doing is preparing me for the day that that fulfillment happens. And I'm sharing all of this with you because I know that in testimony, there is this prophetic thing. There's this thing of like, oh, if that happened for that person, it can happen for me. And I genuinely believe that. And so thanks for weeding my garden with me today. And thank you for allowing me to share this point in my journey and encourage you on this point in yours. Don't stop believing that you're learning for something and that you're being prepared for something. And whatever that dream is, I encourage you to write it down. Just put it there and write it on your heart. Put it right in front of your face. Write it and stick it to your bathroom mirror. And begin looking for opportunities to become prepared for that. And don't discount any of them as foolish. And then when you receive the fulfillment, please do not allow a ceiling to form above you. Because for all you know, your fulfillment is your next classroom to do the next thing that is set before you. And if nothing else, I hope that turning on the camera when thoughts like this are running from my head might be a testament to you that God was good to me in fulfilling the first dream. And I believe him for your dream and for my further dreams as well. I'm out of light. I guess the rest of these weeds are going to have to wait. I bless you guys. Until next time.